Ferkins is the Professor Sport Leadership and Governance at Auckland University of Technology. And now I've got the kookaburras in the background, and currently has an ongoing program of research in leadership and governance with New Zealand Rugby. So welcome, Lesley. Trish Morison is a senior lecturer for nurse education and science and health at the Universal College of Learning. And Celeita is an intensive care paramedic and paramedic degree lecturer at Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand. Elizabeth Orr, who's one of the team members based in Melbourne, is a committed Indigenous ally and action researcher and is a recipient of the Launceston Institute PhD Scholarship and the Nancy Millis Medal. And Elizabeth, welcome, and apologies if I've said Launceston incorrectly, Launceston Institute PhD Scholarship. So we're going to hear from our lovely presenters, and the topic is looking for the aha moments in action research and understanding.
So tēnā koutou, greetings from New Zealand. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, Siobhan, that was much appreciated. The first thing I was going to do was to introduce my AR family, action research family, but we've done a little bit of that already just beforehand. But as was introduced, Professor Lesley Ferkins. Now, Lesley was my supervisor when I did action research doctorate, and I completed that in 2017. And then we had Celeita and who you heard yesterday, and also Trish, who are now my students doing doctoral projects using action research. And we also had our cousin across the ditch, Liz Orr from Australia, who wasn't able to be with us today. So we were called this the aha moments. And thank you very much for the positive comments about my doctorate, but I have to admit that during the journey, it wasn't very clear what I was doing at all. It wasn't until I was nearly finished that I kind of had an aha moment and realized what I was meant to be doing. So together with Lesley at AUT, we started up a connections group to try and bring together people who were looking at action research. And we actually found that there was more people who came and presented studies that had nothing to do with really action research, and we had to point that out to them. And then I thought that if I just shared my aha moments with my students, sorry, we've got noise down here now. It's a helicopter, so it'd be for a good reason, sorry. If I just shared my aha moments with my students, they would get it. And I somehow thought that would work. And then I realized that actually that wasn't going so well. So together with, sorry, they're sitting here, they know all of this. So we over lunch one day, I said, so what is it that actually is, gave you the kind of the sense of what action research was? And it was completely different to my journey. And it made me realize it was actually a lot of different ways that we can get to this action research point. And I thought, well, it would actually be really helpful to work out what those aha moments were, and then take it that next step. Well, how do we actually enable students to have those in a slightly quicker way and more helpful way maybe than I did for my journey? So it was from that conversation I managed to sell it to Celeita and Trish and Lesley, and we recruited Liz as well. And then we have now moved it into a project that has ethics approval, and we'd like to share that with you, and hopefully you might want to be involved by the time we're finished. So I'll hand over to Lesley.
Thank you, Diana. So tēnā koutou katoa ko Lesley Ferkins tuku ingoa, no tamaki makauro. So my name is Lesley Ferkins and I'm from Auckland in New Zealand, and together with Diana and Trish and Celeita in this instance, it's my pleasure to be having a kōrero conversation about the aha moments in action research, as Diana has so beautifully introduced for us. And so that is the essence of what we are planning. And can I just say that we are at this stage conceptualizing all of this. So we are in the early stages of its design. And so far it has been a collaborative process with a few people, and we are looking to develop that collaborative process, of course. And in relation to that aha moment, we are kind of wanting to hone in on the aha moment around that very thing of collaboration / co-design, because we feel that that is the essence, one of the key essence in the versions of action research that we've all been privileged to come into contact with. And in, I guess, thinking about this aha moment, and then kind of doing a bit of study around that in terms of the literature, there is some nice framing and conceptualization of that comes out in terms of this idea of threshold concept or a gateway concept. And so that's what the image there is on the screen of. That's actually the beautiful Waiheke Island, which is an offshore island just 30 minutes on the ferry from Auckland, in the Hauraki Gulf, where the America's Cup will be run shortly in the summer. And that door is a real door because it's part of the sculpture trail artwork of Waiheke Island. We have an arts festival there, and it's a physical sculpture. But it does represent this idea of a conceptual gateway or threshold concept that we are framing our study around. So the question so far we've kind of playing around with is, how can the notion of researching with or co-design be purposefully developed among emerging action researchers? And we feel that this thing needs to be purposefully developed quite early on as well. You know, we will kind of come to our aha moments through the journey, but this is one of them that we feel needs to happen quite early on. So you can click now, Diana, to the next slide. And the next slide is into social constructionism. So social constructionism, we think is a really, really beautiful grand theory, if you like, that in fact helps to embody what it is that we're on about, because social constructionism, the Berger and Luckman 1966 work quite early on for those authors has been established as a gateway concept as well. And once we understand this notion of social constructionism, a lot of other things can flow from that. And we're also drawing thinking around social constructionism in the work of Gerger and Gerger, which come from, it's a really good chapter in the Action Research Handbook, 2nd edition, Reason and Bradbury, where they connect the grand theory of social constructionism to action research, and there are many overlaps. So, and next slide, thanks, Dana. So, in my work in sport leadership in particular, we work with social constructionism, and we call it the social construction of leadership. And in fact, in that way, it has two prongs. And it is that leadership, our view of leadership, how we see leadership, has been shaped by how we've been shaped ourselves. So through sport, our experiences through sport and childhood, how we've grown up, we've come to understand our version of leadership by the interactions of others and how we've been shaped. And also in terms of social constructionism, the idea of the social construction of leadership is that leadership can be created through the multiple interactions of people. So it takes us away from this idea of the individual leader or leader being about the individual, to the notion of leadership, which is about the multiple contributions into the leadership space. And that's an idea that comes from Grint, who talks about putting the ship back into leadership. And Sonia Ozpena is another author that we've drawn on, and I noticed she's also got a chapter in the handbook, the 2nd edition, which connects action research with social constructionism. But essentially, we want to use this grand theoretical idea because we think it will help drive a really deep understanding of finding out about the aha moments in action research. So the next slide, thank you. So, of course, what we're going, well, not of course, but what we are going to do is we're going to do a study within a study. So our study of action research aha moments is also going to be an action research study. And again, the question is there, how can we do this? And in essence, it's about, we want to explore how people have been influenced, and therefore what the perceptions are now and how we can continue to shape their perceptions. And that the understanding that we come to around action research and the aha moments to do with collaboration and co-design can only really be done in conjunction with others. So it is by very nature a collaborative endeavour. So next slide, thank you. And so here is our action research influences. So this is a study within a study. Our own study is action research, and we want to study action research. And as we all know and have heard throughout the conference, and I think Celeita put beautifully yesterday, we all kind of come to our own version of it and our own journeys of it. But collectively, the groups so far have been influenced by these authors and these people. And I don't think we've quite yet landed on, a particular brand and naming version of action research, but we are getting there. For me, the cooperative inquiry and the work of John Heron has been a very important influence. For Celeita, as we heard yesterday, the chemists McTaggart and Nixon, critical participatory action research is an important influence for her. I know for Diana, the David Coughlin and Teresa Brannock doing within your own organisation. And also for Trish and Liz, some of the work of Jürgen, and of course the handbook as we have there. And we know there's another edition that have come out, but we've got the second edition there. And for Liz, Yolanda Wadsworth has also been an important influence. So we've got some overlapping influences and some distinctive influences, and it's been fun to come together to talk about how we're going to position collectively our underlying philosophy and conceptualization, if you like, of our own action research philosophies as we move forward to design our project. Oh, and of course on the slide there is a couple of other key influences. Kurt Lewin there, of course. Well, that's Kurt Lewin, and the person up in the far left, top left, many of you will know. For me, Eileen Piggott-Irvine has been a very important influence in the work that we have done together and the work that Eileen has done in authorship that we've come together. And Eileen's important because what we are doing is a study of a study, but it really is within the educational space, and Eileen's work has been within educational action research as well as leadership. Okay, so next slide, Diana, thank you. So just coming to the early framing. So if that's our philosophical underpinning, which we're kind of coming to together, then this is the actual method pathways or the method footprints that we're currently designing, and that is around perhaps a cooperative inquiry philosophy we may choose to use. But we will be using the 4 phases. We will be using a nice ongoing structure, which we're all pretty familiar with. The context analysis and issue identification phase. We imagine that we will be asking ourselves and others. So the core collaborative group is a group of 4 or 5 at the moment. And then there will be participants that we involve and ask around their own aha moments and how they came to them and why. And to really dig deep and understand how they've been influenced and therefore why it is they've come to this position. And also in a focus group situation to then spar off each other to collectively co-design our thinking and be influenced by others in that very space. So that's the kind of the phase 1 and 2. But then of course we want to do something with that, which is the beautiful thing of action research. We've come to understand this stuff. Now let's put some of this into action, and that's where our phase 3 comes in, where we want to actually create something, to do something. We don't know what that will be, of course, yet, because that's our emergent process, to reflect and do, and then to evaluate. So that is our intention. This is how we're framing it so far. And the next slide, which I'm going to pass over to Celeita, is to give a bit of an example and some explanation in an activity as to how we think we want to outwork this.
So we thought about what questions might help us to share our stories, and things such as these 2 came up. How do we think our philosophies, values, experiences have influenced our initial approach and understanding of action research? And this is something I definitely spoke to a lot yesterday, because it wasn't for quite some time that I really understood actually what I wanted to do research-wise, and it wasn't until I'd been on that journey of exploring and learning that I really started to understand why action research meshed with me and became a reason, in a place, in a way to do my project. We also are thinking about the question, how did our respective action research projects bring about a shift in thinking about ourselves and or a new understanding of action research, and why? And for me, really, it was consolidation of things that I have been doing in my journey as a clinician and as a lecturer over the number of years. And my project really kind of brought everything to focus and just made things in my life make sense as I said yesterday, it was like I was being spoken to when I finally, settled on action research. I think that it's really important we do share each other's stories and journeys, and that very much we will all have an aha moment. And certainly over the last day or so, I've heard a lot of people's conversations, and then it was just like, aha. And at one point in time, I raced over to the screen to try and capture that person and write them a message. And I actually managed to shut down the whole room. I was so excited about it, but hit the wrong button. But it's just really great to hear that there is other people out there who are as passionate and do have those aha moments in their journey of their research as well. Trish has got a story to share as well. Yeah, so she'll be here in a moment to do that. But I think we're all on a journey together, and we're all exploring something new. Sometimes it might be something that makes a difference. And as we're doing action research, often we don't know where that journey is going, and we don't know when that aha moment's going to be. But what I know is that personally, this is, a very personal journey for all of us, and there'll be many moments which will and won't make sense. And it's those moments that are defined with clarity, which really are the aha components, where things that previously just didn't make any sense now suddenly made sense. And as I said just before, for me, this was initially actually around my methodology. And this was probably my biggest understanding of why and how action research, and in particular participatory action research, really interested me. The new understanding my action research project has brought to me is a shift in my thinking, and an understanding that the growth associated to a person when positive change is enabled is really, really rewarding and greatly appreciated. Get back a question. You want to go back to the question? Okay, I don't know if we, there you go.
Kia ora koutou all. I'm Trish, first time, and I've spoken in lots of people's individual activities, but first time presenting here. But so hi everybody. So I'm really grateful to be part of this group, and I have to admit that I'm very new to action research. I started my action research journey late last year, so I'm on a very steep learning curve at the moment. But so with regards to these two questions that we came up, I'm just going to provide an example, because we'll move into these questions for our activity in a moment. So I'm going to provide an example of how I came in, my own understanding as I came into action research influenced how I started that journey and what brought about a change for me. So I approached my action research project with quite an action focused. That is, I had a construct that success for me, for my project, would be judged on the transformative actions that we as a group managed to achieve. In part, perhaps because of who I am maybe, or how I was raised and expectations of me, or perhaps it was how I saw research, that it was going to be the actions. I wanted tangible outcomes for my group as well, because, it was an important topic, but I think that desire, that passion came as we moved together as a group through the journey, and was shared by other people as well, that need for action and to make a difference. As we as a group learned about the minority stresses experienced by the people within our group. So we started with quite an action focus, a bit of a sprint start really. But at some point, I realized that we as a group collaboratively had got so caught up in the actions that I hadn't given adequate attention to the process. And during those early months, my supervisor had said, it's not about the what, it's about the how. And I know I'd read in some books, it's not what we know, but it's how we come to know it. And then I kind of came to realize that, that process was important, not something that had to be stuck to rigidly at the expense of relationships or the politics of the organization, but the process was there for a reason. And such would support not just potentially transformative actions for my group and for the organization, but would also support learning and transformative change for myself and for our group members, and would, if I followed that process, contribute to practical knowing for action research. So I think perhaps the aha moment came when I was reading ethics to do with, so it's a very recent action aha moment, but the ethics to do with our current journey from the Royal Roads University, and the ethics that we were reading for that had this lovely quote in it, which I thought made me think, and this quote was, that it's important that unsuccessful change initiatives provide fertile ground for learning and future change efforts if reported authentically. So then it made me realize that it isn't what we do, what we achieve, but it's how we get there and authentically sharing that journey that's going to be the greatest contribution to other people's action research journeys. So that was my aha moment. So we'd like to invite you all in groups to perhaps give a thought to these two questions. Where were we at when we approached our action research? What was our approach, our understanding, and how did that influence our start? And what happened during that journey that brought about a shift in thinking about ourselves and a new understanding of action research?
So how were your conversations in your groups? Does anyone want to share any, significant aha moments that stood out for you maybe in that discussion?
I'm happy to speak from Lesley hosted us and with John and Ron, and I think we had a really good discussion around aha moments in post the action research, and where we got a moment to look back and probably drawing on a bit of systems thinking and the elements that came together, and we got to either draw a model or the whole of all the elements that pulled in to make that special, and how we've used that going forward. But I think I didn't quite get to finish it, but I think the takeaway is, how do you get that during action research? How do you get it? How do you get that? Maybe it's about providing yourself the time to pull that together during the process, so you, I suppose, maximise the results you want to get using those values and personality items that you talk through in that social construction. Does that summarise it all right, Lesley?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because that's exactly what this project's about. We believe that we want to drive more purposefully the aha moments a bit sooner to maximise these projects.
Yeah, well, we could easily reflect on stuff, but it's probably in the moment that we would have gotten the greatest value, for sure.
Yeah, I think that the point is that you really don't know what you don't know until you actually come across it. And that's the kind of aha. When you get that realization, it's a threshold you cross and you can never go back.
That's it. Nice. Thanks, guys. Did us proud. Another group.
We got time for another group, Siobhan? Yeah. No, she's shaking her head. Okay.
Oh, where is Siobhan?
If we go, yeah, here I am. We could probably, we're 4 minutes over. No, we're 1 minute away, 4 minutes over the 5-minute warning. Okay, so sure. Maybe another group for 2 minutes, and then we'll creep into the break.
Oh, okay.
We've got a 5-minute comfort break. So if one other group wants to share.
We've still got some screen stuff. Yeah. No, that's all right. We've just got a little quote here to finish up with. It's not individuals who come together to create relationships, but relationships that are responsible for the very conception of the individual. And we thought that was a powerful quote. And so just to a little bit of advertising to finish off with, you might have guessed that was coming. We have got ethics approval to get started with this, and we would really like to hear from people who are novices to experienced researchers who would be willing to share their stories of what those aha moments were and how they got to those in their action research journey. So you can contact any of us on the presenting team, or we've got our contact details there. So thank you very much for listening and being part of the discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the enlightening discussion, because there are a few highlights in there, and probably one of them was looking at that grand theory, social constructionism. And John, your observation about once you're over the threshold, it's very hard to go back, if at all, that gateway concept with that beautiful sculpture of the doorway. So thank you for sharing your stories, and ideally we'll all be able to contribute through that email.